Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Malawi burns nearly 20,000 expired AstraZeneca vaccines amid conflicting advice over what to do with the doses. Also, Namibia has accepted a deal from Germany to pay reparations over the first genocide of the 20th century, in which more than 100,000 Herero and Nama people were slaughtered by German troops. And Niger also sees a spike in displacement because of jihadist attacks. There, more than 10,000 people have fled their homes in the west of the country in just 24 hours. But first, nearly 20,000 doses of expired AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines have been destroyed in Malawi. There were what was left from 102,000 doses that were delivered to the country just 2.5 weeks before they expired. The World Health Organization had originally said that they shouldn't be discarded, but changed its advice this week. Sam Bradpeace tells us more.
The incineration of nearly 20,000 vaccines by the Malawian health authorities today was really a symbolic gesture. Now, these close to 20,000 vaccines were actually delivered to the country by the African Union back in March. They expired in April. And essentially, once news began to spread that these vaccines had been expired, the government really felt it had no choice but to incinerate the rest publicly, to send the message to perhaps concerned members of society to say, look, you don't face the risk of being inoculated with an expired vaccine. There's a lot of disinformation and vaccine hesitancy in Malawi. Now, the World Health Organization said that they were disappointed with the fact that so many vaccines had been destroyed or burnt, but ultimately backed the move from the Malawian health authorities. What could this mean for Malawi? Well, it could make it harder for the country to receive shipments of vaccines under schemes like COVAX in the future, having demonstrated that, they've already wasted vaccines in the past. However, that remains to be seen. And really, the battle that needs to be won here is the battle against disinformation and vaccine hesitancy. So far, more than 1,000 people have died from coronavirus in Malawi.
Regional correspondent Sam Bradpeace there for us. Now, a deepening feud between Spain and Morocco has been exacerbated by a record 8,000 illegal migrants leaving the North African enclave to cross over into Europe. Madrid's accused Rabat of disrespect in failing to do more to police their shared border. James Vazina has more.
Either swimming or by boat, migrants continue to reach firm land in Ceuta. The Spanish police tried to repel the crowds with tear gas. Unimpeded by border guards on the other side, Madrid summoned Morocco's ambassador, while Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez lashed out at the country's lack of responsibility.
4,800 people have already been returned to Morocco. All had entered illegally 2 days ago in the autonomous city of Ceuta. In this case, the lack of control by the Moroccan authorities is not only a lack of respect towards Spain, but also towards the European Union as a whole.
The small enclave off the northern coast of Morocco is the EU's only land border with Africa, making it a magnet for migrants seeking to enter Europe from beaches a few kilometres to the south. A journey that's worth the risk for these migrants.
المغرب كامل حاقد ما كاين خدمه ما كاين طبيب ما كاين سبيطارات ما كاين حتى شي حاجه كلشي مخنوق.
The troubles come after tensions rose between Rabat and Madrid when Spain approved medical treatment for the leader of Western Sahara's independence movement, who's been heavily suffering from COVID-19 since April. Brahim Ghali wants autonomy from Morocco, and Spain has yet to acknowledge the country's authority over the Western Sahara territory. Ghali's been summoned to the Spanish High Court on charges of genocide, torture and disappearances. Amid the crisis, mixed messages have been sent from Spain as to whether this upsurge in migration is, in fact, an act of retaliation for the country's medical assistance to the independence leader.
At least 15 people have been killed in Burkina Faso in 2 attacks on a village and soldiers in the north and east of the country. A baptism in the town of Tinekof was targeted overnight on Tuesday as people there celebrated a baptism. On Wednesday, a soldier was killed after a roadside bomb hit a military convoy. The country suffered a resurgence in extremist violence recently. More than 16,000 people have been forced from their homes over the last 2 weeks. Now, Niger has also seen a spike in displacement because of jihadist attacks. There, more than 10,000 people, have fled their homes in the west over just 48 hours. Many have headed to the town of Tillaberi in search of safety. Nicolas Chemin has more.
The exodus was swift. According to the UN, in just 48 hours, more than 10,000 people fled their villages in western Niger and arrived here in the town of Tillaberi. They said they could no longer cope with repeated jihadist attacks in their region. Their villages are located in the flashpoint area where the borders of Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso meet. In May, 20 people were massacred there. In March, one attack left 13 dead. Tillaberi's governor said the state was helping the displaced people.
L'État d'abord a fait un geste qui a permis de nous livrer un tonnage important de céréales, du riz, du mil, du niébé et de l'huile, qui a permis quand même à cette population de se prendre en charge pour quelque temps.
According to the UN, already in January, some 100,000 people had to flee their villages in the Tillaberi region because of the ongoing violence. And 300 schools had to close, leaving 22,000 students without an education.
Well, Namibia has accepted a deal from Germany to pay reparations over what's believed to be the first genocide of the 20th century. More than 100,000 people from the Herero and Nama ethnic groups were slaughtered by German troops between 1904 and 1908. At the time, Namibia was a German colony known as Southwest Africa. For more on this, I'm joined by Dr. Jose Ruruako. Doctor, thanks so much for speaking to me. Now, first of all, what can you tell us about what stage negotiations between Germany and Namibia currently are at?
Well, thank you for having me on your show. This is a very exciting news for the affected people in Namibia, the Hereros and the Namas. This is a good news in a very long while. We are in the final stages of, bringing an end to this rather prolonged issue. The understanding is now that the German government finally have agreed to the three requests that we have made. Number one, to recognize the fact that this was a genocide. And then secondly, to apologize to the affected group. And of course, the second point, and which is very, very important, to pay reparation for the damages that has been inflicted.
You mentioned there that it's a very happy time, and it's been a long journey. How long has it taken to get to this point?
Well, ever since my late uncle, Chief Hosea Kutako, started petitioning the UN in 1946, this issue was on top of the agenda in lieu of what has happened, and also in addition to the push for the Namibian people's self-determination and independence. So for years, ever since Namibia have forged ahead in liberating the country, it has been a simultaneous push and drive and struggle for the Namibian people, and especially the Hereros and the Namas, to push for Germany to honor its obligation in terms of providing reparation to the people that has been affected, and also to make sure that it apologized to what it has done and inflicted on the people. And then on top of that, also to acknowledge that this was a genocide. So it has been something coming on for many, many years.
So 100,000 at a conservative estimate, lives lost in the slaughter at the beginning of the 20th century. But these reparations are for more than just the loss of life. Is that not the case?
Yes, indeed. When the Germans took over, they carved a very, very huge area of Namibia, at the time referred to as the police zone. And that was the most fertile land in the country, where the majority of the mineral ore were found. And what they have done during the time, not only did they seize the land, but they also took the belongings, everything that they found, the cattle, the animals that were there, and in the process left the people in that area, mostly the Hereros and the Namas, completely disenfranchised in terms of land, in terms of property. So this issue goes beyond the actual number of the people that have been killed, but also making sure that the people who have lost so much, finally their dignity is restored and their assets are also somehow paid back.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jose Ruwako there, giving us a bit more insight into Namibia's acceptance of a deal from Journey to pay reparations. Now, a day after the landmark summit in Paris on ways to finance Africa's recovery from the pandemic, and the World Bank said that it will invest $2 billion to support small and medium-sized African businesses. The continent's facing a devastating cost from the global crisis. Earlier, I spoke to the head of the African Development Bank, who told me the continent's nations also have to have a holistic approach to their economic bounce back.
But we've got to link, and we're going to have to link good governance, economic governance, to debt. Because at the end of the day, African countries have to really mobilize a lot more resources domestically. You have to get a lot more better management of public financing. You got to make sure there's efficiency of public expenditures. Also making sure that there is greater transparency in debt, because it's not every debt that you have that's actually transparent. I don't want anything under the table. I want everything on the table in terms of debt, so we know exactly what we are dealing with. And some of the debt that was actually taken, some was for infrastructure, which is okay, but some of them were actually backed by resources. So when you have resource-backed debt and you have asymmetry of negotiations, you negotiate yourself away on a very bad deal.
Well, you can catch my full interview with Dr. Akinwumi Adesina on this week's Across Africa show. I think the first time that you can be catching it on Wednesday is at 11:15 p.m. at Paris time. So do so if you can. That is, though, well, I'll have to leave it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.